Well, hello there guys, welcome to my End of Dragons review series. This is going to be covering both day 6 and day 7 here today. And if you're wondering why there wasn't a dedicated video on day 6, well, that was Monday this week. That's going to become very, very clear to you guys just now. So, this is the last spoiler-free review I'll do ever of End of Dragons. Pretty much any video and content I make from now on, I'm going to be talking about the story. There will be spoilers. As far as I'm concerned, if you haven't really beaten it after 2 weeks, and yet you're watching kind of sincere, deep discussion about the game online, well, the onus is kind of on you at that point. So yeah, it's time to beat the game if you want to keep up with the conversation on this one. I don't think that there's many stragglers or people left behind as far as I can see. So let's talk about day 6. Well, on day 6, I beat the meta. I actually loaded in. I went to EU. I'd been playing on NA all the entirety of End of Dragons up till now. I did one day on EU. There were a bunch of people in this community that were really, really desperate to play that were on EU. We filled up with 50 people very, very easily and very comfortably. I also, though, crucially this time, got into the map with the maximum amount of prep time as possible. So right after the previous meta had failed. That gave all these people on a full map the full period of time, what is it, like an hour? To do all the random events and get their participation buffs up. And really it strikes me that when beating this meta, composition is important, and subgroups and stuff is obviously important, but and having good players and raid ready players and stuff is obviously useful, but all that stuff matters way, way, way less than this simple thing of having a fully prepped map with as many people of those pre-buffs up as possible. See, if you have people that have got the full 10 events before the meta, you can do 25% more damage for everyone in the Zerg. That's like spawning, what was the number in the end? Was 25% of 60? It's like more than 12 extra allies for the group. It's like literally having full new Grandmaster traits and just incredible new power, just because people put that extra bit of time in and suddenly are now so stat crept. Now, I think that it's right to have issues with that requirement of time, and actually finding a perfectly timed map that you know is going to fill up is really tricky if you have no community, if you're not in any discords, if LFG doesn't look good at the time, or if maps are simply full. So there's all these barriers, but it really struck me that that's the bigger deal. If you've got everyone with that buff, if they're also using the Jade Bot Mastery that gives them a bunch more HP and a bunch more strength. I mean, speaking about HP, I think that's even maybe more important. You get these insane vitality bonuses. I was walking around with 50,000 health on my Rich List Harbinger. Now, that's super high compared to what most people get, because, my Rich List stats gave me a ton of vitality. But the point is that these buffs provide a kind of insulation that stops people going downstate so much it's insane. Now, you take a random map, you take a map where people have all of that, there's way less downs, just so much more uptime, and it's just because of stat creep. Also, like Triple Trouble, I think that this meta is much more about coordinating the players so that kills sync up and lanes finish at the same time and all that kind of stuff, and just moving people to the right place more than builds. And that's kind of a logistical game rather than a raid style intense mechanics game. It's more about player management, and Triple Trouble was an awful lot like that. So was Tech to a degree as well, making sure people on the cannons to strip the scales and stuff. Also, again, I want to return to this topic of RNG real quick. I'm not going to talk about the meta too much in this video, but now that I've beaten it, it strikes me that it's not so much as just RNG. What's really happening here is this is a particularly bad map for for snowballing out of control. And that's really what the problem is. So if you're in a group that will clear it, now when I cleared it with this group, we had minutes left on the clock. We had loads of time left on the clock. And the thing is, if you're in a group that will clear it, probably what you'll find is just there's this really comfortable rhythm to the fight where you damage the boss a bit, there'll be a tail, you deal with the tail, you damage the boss, and then you've phased into a whole new section, One of the new mechanics is going to come up, a break bar or a split to other bosses and stuff. So it'll be boss, tail, boss, and then something else. Boss, tail, boss, something else. And you kind of just progress through it, and it's really comfortable. You get loads of time. But if you fall just slightly short of that window, it snowballs out of control, because now you're getting, and the RNG starts having a massive impact at this point, because now you can get 2 tails, and getting 2 tails and all the running around and extra downs that might occur there may very easily lead into 3 tails or 4 tails. And so now a group that could have just phased it and is just slightly out of that window suddenly is miles behind another group that really isn't that different, but it just got that little bit over that threshold, and that wild snowballiness seems really wrong to me in an open world setting. And I think it creates a lot of frustration. That's sort of my observation through groups that will do well and groups that won't. And obviously you can take a little bit of control there. You can think carefully and like say, okay, a tail's up, but we're really close to phasing and we can DPS through it. And that's fine, and I've actually participated in that, but that still just moves the goalpost. The fact is still true. Even a group that, you know, en masse has 60 players that cognitively unified understand this idea that you can pressure through some tails because they have such an innate understanding of the fight, which isn't common. But even if you have that, you've just moved the goalpost. The fact still is there's going to be a threshold where you have to deal with that tail, and it can snowball down. So that's my thoughts on the meta now that I've beaten it and actually done another fail run as well. I still stand by everything I said in my previous video pretty much. Look, no one, and here's my full opinion put very concisely, no one is wrong for loving this meta. No one is wrong for loving having something difficult and having something that has gameplay that actually match the visuals and the intensity of the story at that time. That's something very rare for Guild Wars, and I adore that too. No one's wrong to identify either that probably the studio should push the bar of expectation a little higher on standard Guild Wars 2 play. Guild Wars 2 is a lot more fun when you actually put a little bit more effort into the combat, the build craft, and all the different wonderful ways in which you can engage with it. And a lot of players won't do that unless you raise the bar a bit. And I understand the desire to see that as well. They're totally right things to want, but they shouldn't be in the open world. There are too many nonsense factors here. Frames, messing with settings for people, DC potential, visuals, and just loss of clarity over having all these players, personal contributions being hidden. Even if you like spam a ton of break bar stuff, you don't even really know how much it was that you did compared to other people, for example, let alone DPS. Lack of control over party members you have, playing Join Wars 2 to get into full maps. These things suck, and they all come about from trying to crowbar these desires into the open world. If you love those things I mentioned a second ago, like I do, push for them where they're actually accurate to be in the game. Strikes, raids, fractals, guild challenges. To a lesser degree, we can talk about integrating PvP and World vs. World. I applaud the devs having the guts to experiment at this big final plot beat, but I think they fully went the wrong way on this. And speaking as a Triple Trouble and Tech launch veteran, previous eras of the game always proved this was wrong. So that's how I feel about the matter. Day 6, by the way, and here's why there was no video, I also beat the core game. And by core game, I mean End of Dragons. Fully finished the story. And I really didn't know what to say yesterday morning. Like, I could have just rambled out a bunch of ideas about what I experienced, but my head's really spinning. I need some days to just, like, process and think about it. Not everything I think is positive either, and I don't want to, like, pee on the parade. Rain on the parade. Pee on the parade. I don't want to do that too early while a lot of people are, like, really vibing on what is presentationally a fantastic expansion. So I kind of held off yesterday. Act 4 and 5 are really where I have most of my thoughts, I think. It's a real mixed bag. I will have a video on my story thoughts very soon, possibly even tomorrow. That's why the spoiler gloves are coming off tomorrow. And what I would encourage as well is you guys, you can pause this video right now if you want. Keep typing me your reviews. Some of you have done it already. Big walls of text. I've really been enjoying it. I honestly think I might do like a Q&A style or something on my my approach to talking about the story, just so I can platform what some of your thoughts are, and then I can say where I agree with you, disagree. That would give me a bit of structure. I don't know, but I would really like to read more of your reviews and thoughts. Obviously tag them as a spoiler for the stragglers that might scroll down on this video. This is a spoiler-free one, but I want to hear that stuff. So that's day 6. Let's move on to day 7. This is where I got a hell of a lot of things to talk about. Lots happened today, and there's a bit of a theme for day 7. Let's see if you can spot it. Now, people who were there for the episode of the Let's Play, you're already going to know the theme here. So first, I grabbed all the remaining mastery points across the expansion, like all the, you know, the ones that are essentially points of interest that you've got to climb around for. A lot of them look really challenging and interesting to get to with just End of Dragons masteries. Because remember, if you only have End of Dragons, you only have a T1 Springer. You don't have the Bond of Faith. You don't have a high Springer jump. You can't transition into a glide and then use a bot. You don't have the Skyscan and stuff. But when getting these mastery points so far through the expansion, I've been trying to, like, emulate having a T1 Springer, but I can't really fully get at what that experience is like without being weird with my jump button. And I'm always wondering if I accidentally jump too high. I can't reset the track because the whole system's account bound. I got it half a decade ago, but now I'm stuck with it. So, you know, short of getting a whole new account, which means we lose out on lots of other value from the expansion. So, I can honestly say at this point, I was sort of just jumping and using a lot of Path of Fire-based stuff to get to the masteries, and I don't really have a great sense of how you would get to some of them. And they look like they're fun little puzzles. So I don't know for sure. And also because the mastery points themselves are also account bound, I doubt I'll ever go back to those places ever again. But it does look like for End of Dragons only players, I think there's a lot of fun, like weird little mini jumping puzzles and things to wrestle with. Just like I was complimenting so much within the city. That's kind of true even back on Saitang and stuff too. Speaking of Saitang, I also did the jumping puzzle. And speaking of jumping, I did the full-on jumping puzzle here now. So now I've seen the one in Kaineng. I've seen the one in Saitang. I don't know if there's one in the Jade Sea, and I don't know if there's one in Echovald. I guess I kind of hope there are. The Saitang jumping puzzle doesn't really have the spectacle that the Kaineng one does. It sort of overlaps with regular areas of the map, but it's fun, and it's something to do in kind of the more mountainy Tengu area of the map, which I felt was a little bit empty for content before. So that was really good. It's the Grothmar style, where you light the fires and you move your way along. Quaint. I think it's great for new players. I hope everyone who's got a mate or a family member into the game and is playing End of Dragons, try this. Take them here. It's a fun, simple introduction to jumping puzzles. I think they'll get a kick out of it. Interacts kind of in a fun way with gliding and the Jade Bot and so on. Another thing on Saitang that was huge was I did the meta again. So I actually did this way earlier last week, but I was only able to push one lane because of this weird mega server thing. No one was around or everyone was just spamming the story. So all 3 lanes got pushed here. I set it up with you guys watching in the community, and we slammed it. We got to the final boss. I was kind of confused about this guy. It's Raynak, or Renyak, that does have a lot of dialogue in the main story, but then kind of like drifts away. And I didn't really get who he was or what he was about. Turns out it's in the meta, kind of very Heart of Thorns vibe here. So this explained them a bit better. The fight itself looks boring. It looks just as boring as the Jade Lab fight in Kaineng, which is a real shame. But I don't know whether I can really give you a great opinion here because I never completed the meta. Because there was a bug. So the bug kicked us all out of the room in the middle of the fight. Apparently, as of this morning, it's been fixed. The devs actually threw a patch in. So if I went back now, I could do it. But for that first week, it was bugged. It was a really rough bug too, because it's kind of like blue balls. You're getting kicked out right near the end of a full hours of investment, as you've done the whole meta, right? And it was even worse because the community was convinced that the bug was caused by some chests that spawn in the boss room too early. And if anyone in the Zerg opened one of the chests that they can blatantly see there, and Guild Wars 2 spends its entire existence convincing you to run around after loot, if anyone follows that natural impulse and opens one of those chests, that causes the bug and kicks people out. This is what the community believed. So you can imagine the toxicity and hostility between people as you spend an hour in map chat screaming about this bug. Don't open the chest, don't open the chest. And then you watch as inevitably, obviously, everyone runs into this cave. Loads of people follow the rules and stand behind, but several others will just doop-de-doop-de-doop, wander obliviously over, loot the chest, and just sort of wander around spinning in circles. And you can't help but click them and want to shake them. And, you know, it's not really their fault. They're just ignorant about the idea. Maybe they're playing with chat off. Maybe they're appearing offline, they're not looking at chat. I do that in Guild Wars all the time. It's not their fault, and it's way too much to expect a random player in an MMO, Guild Wars 2 at that, to not open a chest when they see one, and not, you know, engage their critical mind and wonder why that chest is there in the first place. So yeah, I could get a sense of just what a pile of kindling this meta bug was, and I just said, oh well, look, it's bugged, I'll just move on and wait for a fix, and it's already happened. Funny thing is, looking at the patch notes, I don't even know if it's confirmed that the chest being opened early would break it. You know, I think the theory is if you open the chest, it triggers like a kick-out timer in the background. But I don't know. So all that hate and frustration the community threw at each other might not have mattered in the end. But whatever, I guess that means I'll redo the meta at some point. Whether I'll put it in the Let's Play and air quotes bore you all, I don't know. I could do a whole other lane. I mean, that's one nice thing about lane-based metas. There's always a bit of variation on replay. So that's Saitang. I moved on. I did some Echovald. Echovald was full of amazing stuff. First and foremost, I completed one of these like side quest, achievement, collection, UI, Frankenstein feature things that really needs a name and a proper home on the user interface called quests. But I did one of these that had me traveling around the forest finding amber blocks, which I'd previously seen a few. You head around the forest and you kind of create markings on them, and you'll get a hint to a mini dungeon. There's a little bit of a bug where you interact with it too early. You can kind of trick the dialogue in some unfortunate ways, which I unfortunately fell into. But there's a whole mini dungeon, and you can actually use your own deliberation and scrutiny to find the entrance. When you're in there, it has this really cleverly written lore puzzle about the various houses of the Echovald. There's a bunch of cool Dredge stuff in there too, and I love the whole thing about Dredge in the forest. Every time I've got more lore on that in End of Dragons, I've adored it. And it's kind of like really ingrained there. Very immersive, dark, spooky place. probably one of my favorite mini dungeons in the game, just because it's got like this big lore puzzle, and I had a blast doing it. There's even another puzzle where like you're moving these lights around. It's maybe not totally on par with the Dwarven Ruins mini dungeon in Path of Fire, but it's close to being on par to that. But sadly, when I beat it, I got to the end, I spent a long time in there. There were some chests, but I couldn't loot them. And I couldn't loot them because it didn't realise I'd done the puzzles, and that's because apparently the whole thing had bugged. So I didn't get any achievements, any credit, and apparently I missed a ton of fighting and other content in there too. So now I feel really bad, not just because I missed out on the loot or whatever, but because I kind of had an incomplete experience because there was a bug in there, which sucks. I also finished map comp in the Echovald Forest. There were lots of tricky spots, fun, weird places to go, tunnels that I hadn't seen before. I guess right towards the end of map comping it, I was getting a little bored of this thing where you go into an interior room and it's very golden, or it's very purple, or it's very pink because of the stained glass windows, and you collect a thing. You know, by the end, that was getting a little bit, you know, old hat, but they are very, very striking environments. I had a ton of fun finishing map comp, except one last POI, which has this really fun thing where it's in a room, but there's a ghost of an old Guild Wars 1 NPC defending the room. You got to speak to them and trigger a fight. So there's that extra detail there, adore it, but I couldn't get in there because when I spoke to the NPC, there was some kind of bug. So unfortunately, I have all the exploration for the entire game, the entire expansion done, except Echovald Forest, which is 98%, and it's just that one little mystery room that I can't go to because of this bug. Speaking of mini dungeons, not that POI was really a mini dungeon, it was just like an elaborate thing, which the Echovald's full of. There was another mini dungeon in the Jade Sea, where I also went today. Found some cool lore about the Zaitan disaster and the colour of the jade there, which was really interesting, though a little confusing to me and doesn't seem to work with the logic of some of the other stuff in the expansion. I guess more conversation on that tomorrow. But one of these cool temples. Now, you'll remember on the pre-release stream, the devs were talking about the Jade Sea, and they specifically said there was a mini dungeon, and they specifically compared that mini dungeon to the Dwarven puzzle place. So I found it. I was led there by some people in the live chat. There's this great hidden grate that you can press F on, moves you into this massive place with all these beautiful temples. You're traveling sequentially through these rooms. There's loads of voice-acted dialogue there. Every room is some kind of like an arena fight. As you progress through more, your damage goes down. It's really not a challenge, but again, it's the open world, and they have to, you know, balance for the lowest common denominator in the open world. So I'm progressing through these rooms, listening to this dialogue. Again, I don't think this on its own is on par with the Dwarven puzzle, like they suggested pre-release, but if you look at both the Echovald mini dungeon and the Jade Sea together, since POF only had one, this expansion has two, I do think that they've hit that bar. I really do. And hey, there might be more around in like Kaindeng or Saitung that I just haven't seen yet. But so this was really fun. Went through fighting all the bosses. When I fought the final boss though, I got kicked out. And I spoke to the NPC that had taken me in there, and it seemed to think I hadn't done it. Have you guessed the theme yet, guys? It was bugged. So when I completed it, I didn't get anything. I'll have to redo that as well. Bugs. Stalling bugs. It really strikes me that I had a perfect, smooth End of Dragons experience through the main story and all the original stuff. Like, I really didn't hit any bugs, did I? Maybe there was like one. But as soon as I've hit post-game here and gone a little off the beaten path, bugs, stalling bugs particularly as well. I mean, there's weird minor things that don't matter very much, but they're all over the place. So here I'm starting to wonder if I've gone ahead of the curve a little bit. To ArenaNet's credit, they are putting a lot of patches out, and I can see a ton of bugs getting fixed. To their to End of Dragons' credit, the other expansions were a lot like this too. So I don't want it to be too much of a drag. I don't want to put people off of playing it. But really, yesterday was just a whole slew of them, which was really, really, really funny to me. Aside from this, I've started just looking more into achievements. There is a lot post-game story and extra of these quest things to do. They have an assortment of mount objectives too that I've noticed I haven't done, where the game is to get from one place on a map to another in a really short time and never dismount. We've seen them do that a bit already in the game, like in Living World, usually with the Beetle, where you do some kind of like ramp and you know, fall off a cliff or something. Lots of fun, but it's here with like the Raptor and the Springer now. I kind of wish they were full adventures, because that's something that POF did that this expansion didn't, and they kind of feel like they should be adventures. Give them leaderboards, make them replayable, not just achievements that we'll do once on our account ever and never return to. The other thing that's really starting to catch my eye is fishing. It looks like an insane progression, which I'm nowhere near even starting. It'll probably be once I've canvassed all this other stuff, and I kind of feel totally done with the X-Back, and we're just like waiting for the CMs and stuff to come in. I'll be fishing a lot, and I think I'm going to have a lot of fun with that. One of the post-story collections I did was following a character. I won't say who, so that you know who might survive or who might die in the game. A character who I kind of follow all over Cantha. You get a lot of detail about even Season 2 there, which was great. The cohesiveness of the story in this one's really good. There was a lot of typed and voice-acted dialogue. I think they hit a reasonable balance with that. Sadly, I couldn't beat it because, and this one isn't a bug, it's because it's locked behind the damn meta again. Like, the final parts of the story are behind the meta, and I think they do that a lot. So, again, just more reasons why they shouldn't have taken this experiment on, because so much of the other supplemental content of the expansion revolves around beating the thing. I gave that a quick shot again then, the meta one final time. This time was not with you guys, not something I'd prepped. It was just a random map I went in. Normal Guild Wars players, see what happens. And I could instantly feel how much worse the whole thing was going to be and how much more of a struggle it was. The group failed, of course, and that was basically the end of my day. The one nice thing is I got to see like an interesting phase of the meta that I hadn't seen before, and that dinged an achievement, so it wasn't a total waste. Oh, and don't let me forget, at some point in this action-packed day, I squeezed in the final strike mission at 10-man. Now that I beat the story, I see the last strike. I can't talk about it, except that it has great spectacle. It felt tuned to me to be balanced about as difficult as the other strikes in the expansion. It was probably slightly harder, though. I think we got it in like 3 or 4 attempts, right? So it's on par with the other ones. Except one of them that I did, we one-shot one of them. I should note, though, that it was a bit easier for me, but I was playing with you guys who seem to have already beaten it before and knew the mechanics to at least to a reasonable degree. So that would have made things much easier as far as like number of first attempts for first clear. I don't know if I can speak to the true tuning then, if a good chunk of the players I was playing with already sort of had it down pat. It amazes me that in just 1 week among this community, so many of you guys are like ahead and know what you're doing and all this stuff. I had a similar feeling with the meta. So I'm really keen on the CMs for that one. And when the spoiler gloves come off, we'll go into more detail. That's it. That's what I did. A huge range of content. An altogether great day, despite the bugs, because I'm pretty easy breezy about that stuff. I'm hoping for more of the same on day 8, except minus the bugs. And especially I want to go to the city more. I spent very little time there yesterday, and there's a lot of lore about some of the like stories that we might be going into after all of this that they're teasing. That I just got to see if there's more teasers around there. Hopefully another mini dungeon. So feel free to come along for that episode of the Let's Play. The Let's Play's probably going to end at the end of the week, so these are the last few ones as we round out the game. Thanks so much for watching, guys. And again, drop your story takes down below if you like. Spoiler tag them, but I may platform them on tomorrow's episode. Thank you, everybody. Hope you enjoy. See you next time.